Hello, welcome to the Living History School. My name's Scott, and today we're going to be looking at Captain Lewis and Captain Clark in a box. So out here at the Living History School, we teach a program for school kids on the Lewis and Clark expedition. And today I have a whole collection of artifacts and things that we use to teach about the expedition. So this is a copy of Captain Lewis's elkskin bound journal. He used a piece of elkskin and a button here and then a tie that he had made, or did the military stuff for the Corps of Discovery. So here's an actual copy, or a replica copy of Captain Lewis's journal, and in here you can see these are some drawings of Chinook canoes on the Columbia, along with their paddles. Here's a little small drawing of the paddle used by the Indians at the mouth of the Columbia. So, of course, Captain Lewis recorded a lot of the plants here in Oregon. One of them was Oregon grape. He would have go out into the field and collect these and press them, and then put them into his journal to send back to President Jefferson. On top of plants, of course, they would take animals. They would collect the bones of the animals, and they would put them into boil them down and take their skins and bones and box them up and put them in boxes to send back, along with birds. They would stuff birds and put them also in boxes. So it was a scientific and military expedition. So also, of course, they met with Indians along the way, and so they had to have trade goods for each tribe that they met. And so by the time they reached the Columbia River, they were pretty much almost out of trade goods. They had maybe a handful of things to trade with the Indians. One of the things that the Chinook people on the coast of the mouth of the Columbia River wanted was the blue beads. They had been trading with traders before Lewis and Clark arrived. Being at the mouth of the Columbia River along the ocean, they were able to get things from previous sailing ships. So they were pretty savvy traders. So they wanted the blue beads, these cobalt blue beads from Captain Lewis and Captain Clark. They also, another prize was simple bells, tacks, fish hooks. These are fish hooks. Of course, they didn't have eyes on the fish hooks. These are older type of fish hooks. Tobacco, wire, just simple cloth, red cloth they would trade, along with flags. They gave out a lot of American flags. The Star-Spangled Banner, the 15-star flag, was given to various tribes as a gift. So by the time they reached the Columbia, they were wearing basically elk skin. This is an elk skin on the ground here, what all the artifacts are sitting on. And they had elk skin clothes, and their clothes basically rotted out here in the rain in Oregon. It was so wet all the time. They were just their hides were just rotting off their backs. As you know, Indian people wear cedar here, but they got to the point where at the end they actually took one of the large Star-Spangled Banner American flags and actually wore it, made some shirts and jackets out of it. So can you imagine what Captain Lewis and Captain Clark probably looked like on their way back with, pieces of tatters of flags that they were actually wearing in their clothing, and along with, bits and pieces of their old military uniforms. Of course, this is a military expedition. One of the last things Captain Lewis did before he left Fort Clatsop was to write this letter. And here's a letter stating basically that they arrived here in the winter of 1805 and stayed to the winter of 1806. It says here they made it across the continent. They crossed the continent, and they listed basically their names. So here it says Captain Meriwether Lewis, 1st U.S. Regiment Infantry, Captain William Clark on the expedition for Northwest Discovery, and it lists the 3 squads. They were in squads, just like in the military. 3 squads with 3 sergeants over each of about 10 men. And here's all the men listed here. A lot of them were French Canadians. Some were Americans. These were the best of the best. They wanted the best military men they could find during that day to sign up for this expedition. And this letter was to prove that they had crossed the continent. And a copy was left here. It was found left to the Indian tribe here, and they had actually got it to a sea captain, which went all the way around the Cape Horn and back back to the eastern part of the United States. Eventually made it back to President Jefferson, letting him know that they did make it. And so that's why we have a copy of this today. And then at the very end of the interpreters was listed here, George Julliard and Toussaint Charbonneau, 2 French Canadians who knew how to speak some of the Indian languages along the way. And then lastly, which is kind of interesting, at the very end, Charbonneau's Shoshone wife, Sakakawea, which means bird woman, their infant son, John Baptiste, he was just a little baby. He started when he was like 4 months old, and he went on Sacagawea's back all the way across on the expedition. And then, of course, at the very end, Clark's black manservant, York. Clark brought around his own servant, his own slave, basically, to come with him, and his name was York, and he was part of the Corps of Discovery. And then at the very last, Lewis's dog is mentioned here, Seaman Lewis's dog, which is a big Newfoundland dog. That all these guys came across the continent, not just a woman, but a baby, a dog, and this kind of mix of military / wilderness guys on this military expedition made it all the way across to Oregon, the mouth of Columbia, and made it back. This was a 2-year expedition. So this was the letter, which is very interesting. So here's I'll go through quickly some of the stuff that we had in the box. Clay pipes, of course. They had spotting scope, some compass. The men had to shave. They're part of a military expedition. People didn't have long beards. They were required to every few days to stop and shave and clean up. And they marched and formed line, just like in the military back then. It wasn't just a ragtag mountain men thing. It was a military expedition, so they had to follow military rules and, of course, hygiene rules and inspections and all that. They played games. This is a mouth harp. Some of the guys fished. They were sometimes they gambled, but if they got caught gambling, they were in trouble. So in this bottle is some salt that I made. Several years ago, I was part of a group at Fort Clatsop doing a reenactment, and we actually made salt from the ocean. We boiled salt water, just like Captain Lewis and Captain Clark in the Corps of Discovery went out to the salt works and actually made salt there for about a month. They camped along the beach and made some salt to trade with the Indians because they ran out of trading goods, so they needed something to trade, also to salt their food. So this is a copy of the peace medal. These were given out to generally the chiefs of the tribe. It says peace and friendship on one side, and then if we flip it over here, it has a picture of President Jefferson on the other. So these were given out, and they're called peace medals. Of course, on one side it had called peace and friendship, and then there's 2 people shaking hands, and then it has a tomahawk and a peace pipe on there. So this is just a collection of some of the things we use out here at the Living History School to teach about the Lewis and Clark expedition. I thought I'd show you, and thought you would enjoy it. So thanks for joining me today at the Living History School, and have a great weekend.